proud to have been asked to speak here today at the 38th anniversary of Dubliner Pat Cannon. Pat Cannon, a young, outgoing man from a typical working-class family in the Edenmore estate, who died with his comrade, Peter McElcher, on active service in July 1976. And on the 11th of August 2013, on Tyrone's Volunteer Day, a monument was unveiled to the memory of Patrick and Peter, and prayers were said and flowers were laid this week. But Pat was a young tradesman who travelled around the country working as a welder. He lived an ordinary life, but it was an ordinary life in extraordinary times. And the civil rights movement was well underway in the north as Pat grew up. A movement with simple demands of equality in housing, voting and employment. These simple, peaceful demands were met with violence. Nationalist communities were attacked by mobs, and all the time the Irish government stood idly by and failed to act. They failed to act while hundreds of civilians were interned without trial. They failed to act when in 1972 14 innocent civilians were killed by the British Army. Pat Cannon did not fail to act. He did not stand idly by while his fellow Irish men and Irish women in the north were being brutally treated and killed by the British government. Pat joined the IRA and assisted in the engineering department up until his premature death at the tender age of 20. A young man with his whole life ahead of him, killed while fighting for a united Ireland, an Ireland of equals. And today we are fortunate in that we have found a peaceful way to continue the cause of Irish freedom. And we have never and must never lose sight of our goal. We cannot take the peace process for granted, and it is the responsibility of all of us here today, as Republicans, to ensure that it does not fail. There can be no return to the violence that took the lives of so many young men and women like Pat Cannon and Peter McElcher. And 2014 has been a momentous year, as Micheál said, for the Republican movement. Sinn Féin has had its most successful election since 1918, and we are now in a position to say that every single person in the 32 counties has a Sinn Féin representative. That is a monumental achievement. From Mizenhead to Mallinhead, from Rathlin Island to Cape Clear, there is a Sinn Féin representative for the people. And we must now continue to build on this strength. We must never let the deaths of Pat and his fallen comrades be in vain, because the most fitting tribute that you can pay to these is to realise the aims for which they died, and that is a united Ireland of equals. But we must also remember, Acarja, that equality does not stop at the Irish coastline. It is hard not to reflect on what we see happening today outside our own borders and reflect on the words that he who allows oppression shares the crime. Pat refused to allow the oppression of nationalist communities in the north, and we must refuse to allow the oppression of the Palestinian people. We must take every opportunity we have to shout that the atrocities taking place in Gaza today must stop. We must demand that the Israeli government stop its collective punishment of the Palestinian people and engage in direct dialogue with the Palestinian government to find a peaceful solution. If we do not stand as a nation and demand that the violations of human rights taking place daily in Palestine stop, then we are complicit in those crimes. I stood in solidarity with the people of Gaza in the European Parliament on Wednesday with my fellow Sinn Féin MEPs, and I was appalled to hear the deniers from across the European Union, to hear them justify the bombings of hospitals, of schools, of apartments, and one of those deniers was a Tory MEP, a former brigadier in the British Army, an army that has itself carried out atrocities against innocent people, so perhaps I shouldn't have been so taken aback. But I was. I sat in disbelief to hear the lies being propagated, and it reminded me of our own struggle, of the lies propagated about Bloody Sunday, about Ballymurphy, and the countless other cases. We must take our inspiration from comrades like Pat Cannon, who stood up against oppression. We, as Republicans, must silence those lies. We must shame those who spout them. And as the images of dead innocent children fill our TV and computer screens, we should call to mind the lyrics of the Florence Reese song and ask of our politicians worldwide, which side are you on? Goramila Mahagwiv.